A powerful businessman openly defied the judgment of a respected judge, shaking the entire city's faith in justice. Leonard Hayes's confidence and shadowy influence made his public act of defiance all the more infuriating. But behind the scenes, Agent Marcus Evans and a determined team set in motion an investigation that would change everything for Hayes. Discover how a stunning reversal shattered a seemingly unbreakable empire and brought long-awaited triumph to those who never gave up hope. The atmosphere inside the courthouse was so thick with tension that it felt like the very air might shatter at any moment. Every bench, every corner, every hallway buzzed with a mixture of nerves and barely contained curiosity. For weeks, rumors had spiraled through the city, growing with each retelling. This wasn't just another case, and Leonard Hayes wasn't just another defendant. On this day, the corridors of justice seemed to tremble under the weight of what was about to unfold. Leonard Hayes was not a man accustomed to powerlessness. He'd built his legacy brick by brick, favor by favor, a master of negotiation and quiet deals behind closed doors. His voice echoed in prestigious meetings. His signature on contracts opened doors for countless businesses and projects. His name was spoken with a cautious reverence, both admired and feared in equal measure. For Hayes, legal threats had always been a distant thundercloud, perhaps, but never likely to rain on his parade. Across from him sat Judge Rachel Hampton, a calm in the storm with a reputation every bit as formidable as Hayes's own, though for opposite reasons. Her convictions ran deeper than the city's rivers, and her sense of justice was as consistent as the hands of an antique clock. Stories about her circulated in the legal community. Lawyers recalled her wisdom. Prosecutors respected her courage. Even those who lost their cases against her rulings grudgingly admitted her fairness. Some whispered that nothing could shake her, not pressure from above nor public turmoil outside. That reputation would be tested today. Reporters filled every available space, cameras poised for the slightest hint of drama. They scribbled notes as Judge Hampton called the proceedings to order, their lenses focusing on the minute details. Hayes tapping his ring on the table, her unblinking gaze as she read the charges. The mood was cut with silent judgments and exchanged glances, everyone knowing this trial would leave a mark. As the evidence was presented, it piled up like bricks around Hayes' mismanaged funds, manipulated contracts, testimonies from those who once called him a mentor. Each revelation was greeted with a ripple of shock through the audience. Each new witness added weight to the narrative of carefully crafted deception. The city's faith in its own institutions wavered as the depth of Hayes's operations became clear. Even then, Hayes seemed mostly unbothered. He exchanged confident looks with his lawyers, straightened his tie, even allowed himself a faint, defiant smile now and again. It wasn't until Judge Hampton began her final words that his calm began to fracture. Her voice was level, but strong, her words chosen for precision and impact. She spoke not simply as a judge, but as a steward of the public trust, addressing both the man before her and the people looking on, inside and far beyond those courtroom walls. When the verdict came, the transformation was immediate. Hayes, who had been so perfectly composed, rose before anyone could react, his chair screeching against the polished floor. He spoke loud enough for everyone to hear, challenging the authority of the court, tossing pointed remarks at Judge Hampton's integrity, his gestures large and unguarded. There were no threats, nothing profane or violent, just a bold public display of disrespect and refusal to accept what had been decided. Every camera shutter, every smartphone, captured those moments in perfect clarity. The shock of that display tore through the courthouse. Some gasped, some whispered urgent remarks to their neighbors. The sight of a powerful man openly rejecting the system struck a chord that resonated far beyond those walls. Online, the event exploded across news feeds and platforms, commentators and everyday citizens alike expressing outrage and disappointment in equal measure. For Judge Hampton, though, the only response was a deep breath. She met Hayes's outburst with the same unwavering composure, her expression neither angry nor shaken, but resolute. Her presence seemed to fill the room, her silence a rebuke all its own. Hayes's entourage, sensing the escalating stakes, hurried to contain him. They gathered him up with well-practiced efficiency, the legal team whispering counsel as they shielded him from the swarm of press. The group departed the courtroom quickly. No apologies offered, no words spared for those left bewildered in the aftermath. With a few clipped orders and a briefcase snapped shut, Hayes melted into the safety of waiting cars and familiar routines, leaving confusion and anger swirling in his wake. In the hours that followed, the city reeled. Talk radio hosts debated the future of the legal system. Neighbors at coffee shops traded incredulous stories. Social media hummed with disbelief and condemnation. A collective sense of injustice brimmed everywhere that day. For many it was not just anger for Judge Hampton's sake, but a personal affront, a reminder that too often those with power seemed to live above the rules meant for everyone else. Unseen to most, Rachel Hampton lingered in the emptying courtroom for several minutes afterward. She looked over the benches, at the flags, at the seal above her chair. There was a heaviness in her, but also resolve. She knew that moments like this, when the system was tested, when it seemed on the verge of bending, were the very times she and her peers needed to be at their strongest. And as sunlight poured through the tall courthouse windows, illuminating the banners and the silent rows, it was clear to all who remained that this story was only beginning. The city would not forget this trial. Justice, though delayed or wounded, was not defeated. Not while people like her stood watch. In the aftermath of the courtroom spectacle, the city's attention turned from the verdict to the sprawling shadow of Leonard Hayes's hidden empire. Although the law had spoken, many wondered if justice could truly reach someone whose connections seemed nearly limitless. Whispers of his influence drifted through offices, households, and digital chat rooms, a network so vast and intricate that few could claim to fully understand its scope. Hayes's reach extended into areas most people rarely considered. Through shell companies and charitable organizations, he had woven a web of accounts and contracts that crisscrossed the city's economic landscape. He maintained partnerships with respected business leaders, quietly sponsored community projects, and distributed resources to events praised in local newspapers. On the surface, it all seemed philanthropic, but underneath, every handshake tightened his hold on those who depended on his favor. This network operated unobserved for years, thriving on secrecy, loyalty, and careful planning. Employees who left his companies sometimes found their new prospects evaporate mysteriously. Competitors noticed their bids lost to firms with no history and no clear expertise. Behind the scenes, silent arrangements traded opportunity for silence, building a fortress around Hayes's reputation. However, the incident in court had shifted the balance, breaking the momentum Hayes had enjoyed for so long. Journalists felt emboldened to revisit old stories, connecting dots that had once seemed irrelevant. Investigative reporters began cross-referencing business registrations and city records, discovering inconsistencies and links they hadn't noticed before. For the first time, voices from inside his organization spoke out, offering information on how contracts were won and resources allocated. Among those watching closely was Agent Marcus Evans of the FBI. While he had originally been assigned to monitor routine financial reports, the public uproar turned his assignment into a mission charged with new urgency. Marcus was known among his peers for his commitment, his analytical mind, and a personal understanding of how corruption could undercut a community's sense of hope. Raised in a family of public servants, he had seen firsthand that justice, when denied to even one person, reverberated outward to erode trust in everyone. Marcus approached the Hayes investigation, not just as a duty, but as a challenge to everything he believed about fairness. He was methodical, poring over spreadsheets and testimony late into each night, following the faintest traces of misused funds and conflicting reports. Gradually, a picture emerged. Phone records, transaction histories, emails that hinted at decisions made well outside public view. While Hayes attempted to reassure his allies and maintain business as usual, cracks began to show. Interviews with former colleagues revealed a growing anxiety once loyal partners distanced themselves, sensing a shift in public opinion. Some openly questioned the ethics of deals they had previously defended. Small, seemingly insignificant details. A missed payment here, a contract cancellation there, slowly built pressure throughout the network. In this new climate, information became currency, and those who possessed it began to trade carefully. The city watched as rumors gave way to evidence, the illusion of an unassailable empire frayed at the edges. And for Marcus Evans, the investigation took on a personal dimension. As he traced the web of influence, the pain of seeing justice undermined turned into a determination to ensure that no amount of power could silence the truth. Every step forward pressed Hayes's network harder, revealing how deeply its roots had grown. But with each revelation, hope flickered among ordinary citizens. Perhaps real accountability was finally within reach. The battle for justice, once fought quietly in sealed offices and dimly lit boardrooms, had erupted into public view. And this time, the city was watching with fresh resolve. The investigation transformed from a cautious inquiry into a full-scale federal operation that dominated the city's attention. What had once been quiet exchanges of information became a dynamic effort, as Agent Marcus Evans's team expanded with experts in financial analysis, cyber forensics, and legal compliance. The level of coordination was unprecedented, reflecting both the complexity of Hayes's dealings and the commitment of authorities to restore trust in public institutions. Behind closed doors, the days blurred together in a routine of sorting, interpreting, and connecting scattered data points. Every morning began with status briefings, whiteboards filled with names, account numbers, shell companies, and puzzling abbreviations. Each spreadsheet cross-checked, every phone log and email pattern scrutinized for clues. Hayes's network, once invisible to the public, became a living map inside the war room, a tangle of relationships and transactions, daunting but no longer impenetrable. Marcus's skills as a leader were tested as he navigated shifting timelines and high-pressure decisions. He focused on integrity and clarity, making sure his team understood the immense responsibility before them. For Marcus, this was not just about exposing wrongdoing, it was about defending the ideals he had inherited from his parents, both lifelong public servants who had faced their own battles against corruption in smaller but no less significant ways. As the investigation deepened, those closest to Hayes began to feel the strain of the walls closing in. Former executives received quiet visits, not accusations but invitations to tell their side of the story. Some resisted, hoping for protection and loyalty, but others saw in Marcus a determination that felt different from routine investigations of the past. One by one, partners and confidants made choices, a discreet call to an agent, a sealed envelope of documents, a nervous promise to appear before a grand jury if asked. Days grew tense as word spread through legal and business circles. Deals that once hinged on a handshake now hung in limbo. Leaders of local organizations fielded questions about donations and contracts, while city employees wondered aloud what else might be uncovered. The media, no longer satisfied with surface-level reporting, began producing in-depth stories that traced suspect payments, board memberships, and odd coincidences in staffing changes, each segment pushing public curiosity into impatience and a thirst for closure. Then a breakthrough shifted everything. Marcus's team traced a substantial payment through a sequence of corporate accounts, finally landing at a little-used but government-facing vendor. This vendor, it turned out, had managed to secure a lucrative city contract months after making a significant donation to one of Hayes's foundations. It was the piece that turned suspicion into certainty, giving the prosecutors the leverage needed for a coordinated takedown. The operation was scheduled for early morning to avoid unwanted attention and ensure accuracy. Multiple squads prepared to move on offices, storage facilities, and private residences. Marcus briefed everyone with the gravity of the moment, reminding them of the need for professionalism and empathy. There would be witnesses, and all deserved to see the system functioning with transparency and respect. As sunrise bathed the city, federal vehicles converged on Hayes's headquarters. Agents executed warrants with methodical calm, securing digital archives, financial records, encrypted devices, and legal documents. Employees looked on in disbelief, their daily routines disrupted by the sudden presence of authority. For the first time, the fear that Hayes had instilled for years was replaced by a silent recognition that his era was over. Inside his executive office, Hayes sat at his polished desk, surrounded by the symbols of his achievements. He listened without interruption as Marcus introduced himself and explained the situation. There was no need for confrontation. The evidence spoke for itself. Hayes's confident demeanor softened as the reality settled. A network years in the making, undone not by a dramatic outburst, but by patient, relentless pursuit of the truth. The dismantling of the network extended far beyond a single morning. Over the following days, the team catalogued evidence, interviewed witnesses, and expanded the investigation to include additional contracts and partnerships. The city watched as headlines chronicled each new step, the unmasking of collaborators, the unraveling of shell companies, the suspension of lucrative deals that had for so long operated with impunity. Through it all, Marcus and his colleagues preserved a sense of purpose. When exhaustion threatened to wear them down, they recalled what was at stake. Not just a series of convictions, but the chance to prove that integrity could prevail, even when faced with entrenched power. By the end, as the network lay exposed and Hayes faced a future stripped of influence, there was a quiet triumph throughout the agency and a growing hope among the public. The story became a testament to persistence, a network built on years of secrecy, disassembled by weeks of collaboration and transparency. For those who lived through it, on both sides of the investigation, it reshaped the meaning of accountability, and it reminded the city that no matter how dense the shadow, the truth could find its way through. Weeks passed, and the courthouse found itself in the midst of another historic day. The city's tension had simmered into quiet anticipation. This time, the corridors filled not with spectacle, but with a sense of cautious hope. People stood outside for hours, determined to witness the final chapter of a story that had reshaped public faith in justice. Judge Rachel Hampton entered the courtroom with measured steps, her presence anchoring the room. The same reporters who once documented every sharp glance now waited for words that would echo far beyond these walls. No one spoke. Even the smallest sound-shuffling papers, a nervous sigh, seemed amplified in the expectant hush. Leonard Hayes sat at the defense table, transformed from his former self. The arrogance and certainty that had shielded him for so many years were gone, replaced by a thoughtful stillness. He listened intently, his expression shifting as the consequences of his actions were detailed once again. Above all, he faced the reality of a future he could no longer control. Judge Hampton delivered her decision with clarity and calm dignity. She spoke not only to Hayes but to a city eager for resolution. Her words affirmed the gravity of his choices, the loss of public trust, the years of quiet damage, and the pain felt by so many on account of unchecked ambition. Yet she focused not on condemnation, but on the possibility of restoration, that justice, when sought patiently and fearlessly, could begin to heal what had been harmed. Hayes received his sentence, an extended term in federal prison, the forfeiture of ill-gotten gains, and the formal acknowledgement that no person, no matter their power, could outweigh the rules that bind a community together. He did not protest. He absorbed the news not with an outburst, but with a kind of reverence, as if realizing the weight of his choices for the first time. As Judge Hampton concluded, the room erupted not in noise but in profound silence. That silence was its own victory, a signal of respect for the law, and for those who uphold it, even against daunting odds. After the proceedings, the doors opened and people filed quietly into the streets. The conversations that followed centered not on Hayes's crimes, but on the resilience of those who had refused to give up on the process. Marcus Evans, lingering outside with members of his team, watched as citizens exchanged nods of approval and relief. He realized that while justice sometimes moved slowly, its arrival had the power to unite and inspire. Judge Hampton returned to her chambers, finding a moment of peace after weeks of scrutiny and challenge. The courthouse, once so restless, felt lighter. The story's end was not explosive, but it was deeply moving. It left behind a sense of catharsis, a collective understanding that justice, though often hard-won, could still transform a city and restore faith where it had been lost.